LiberalViewer presents.
So, welcome to the April 21st edition of LiberalViewer Sunday Live Clip Roundup. Thanks for joining me. Oh, look at this. Gotta push my thing a little bit here. I've had all sorts of new things I'm going to show you. Sorry, had to get my frame right there. It's a big news weekend again with the Mueller report coming out on Thursday. I picked out the weekend's 17 best, most newsworthy clips for what should be really informative, educational, fair use media criticism and political analysis for you all tonight, where I'll be discussing the clips from the big five corporate outlets of ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, and Fox News, the so-called corporate media here in the United States. The political comedy sources, there's no Bill Maher, there's no Saturday Night Live, so it's just going to be a couple unintentional comedy clips from Rudy Giuliani and Kellyanne Conway right at the beginning from the newsmakers themselves. And I'll be doing something a little bit different, something I haven't done before. I've put together a live screen capture window here where I can scroll through the Mueller report. So if I want to talk with you about the Mueller report here, I can just scroll through to different parts and we can talk about those parts, which is something I will be doing just to show you all the evidence that backs up my title, Collusion, Obstruction, because there is plenty of evidence of collusion and plenty of evidence of obstruction in the Mueller report, which I will demonstrate in a little bit. But I want to get to my first political comedy source, which is Rudy Giuliani claiming, "Oh, what's in the Mueller report? That's not evidence. That's just stuff." And this is just 13 seconds from a much longer clip I'll be showing later here.
Find a single piece of evidence for anything: hacking, dissemination.
An entire volume of evidence. It just doesn't rise to criminality.
There's an entire volume of stuff, not of evidence.
You can call it stuff.
So that's it. It's not evidence in the Mueller report. It's stuff, and I'll show you the longer context of that. That actually, I believe, you can follow along with my list of clips, by the way, of my 17 clips. I have sort of cryptic notes. There's a link down in the video description to that. I believe the longer version of that'll be clip 12. But the second clip I want to show you is as part of, this is Easter weekend, Passover weekend, whatever holiday you follow or don't follow. I hope you're having a good weekend. And Kellyanne Conway, at the end of her interview with Martha Raddatz on This Week with George Stephanopoulos, it seems like she's found a new way to say thank you, happy Easter, happy Passover, or whatever you celebrate, which I will discuss with you after we watch that clip together over here.
Got to be your last point there, Kellyanne. Thank you for having me. No, full exoneration, no obstruction, no criminal conspiracy. The president and everyone should have a happy Easter, happy Passover, whatever it is that you celebrate. Thank you.
Thanks for.
So I've heard that the Trump administration has made it safe to say Merry Christmas again, but I didn't realize he made it safe to say no collusion, no obstruction, happy Easter. That seems to be like the new way to say Happy Easter, at least from Kellyanne Conway. Anyway, those were my two political comedy clips, such as they are. So I figured before I get to the news summaries, I am actually going to do my own little news summary of the Mueller report, as I promised here. Let me just see how are things. Yeah, it looks like my stream is going okay. Looks like I have people watching here. So I will scroll over here to the Mueller report, and I want to show you several instances here of collusion and obstruction. So to start with, now there's a link down in the video description where you can download the Mueller report yourself in a big PDF. And I'm going to refer to the PDF pages. Oh, God damn it. So first I want to start on page 44 of the PDF here. I'm scrolling. And on page 44, you'll see, and this, by the way, is page 36 of volume 1 on collusion or conspiracy or whatever. There's been some talk about whether Russia hacked the DNC, the DCC, the Hillary Clinton campaign. Well, here you can see a whole section on Russian hacking and dumping operations, where, and this isn't actually new information. This is all tracks with Bob Mueller's indictment of all these Russians. I mean, if you look here, he not only says that Russia, oh, I hope I didn't mess up. He not only says that Russia hacked the all these campaigns, he tells you the numbers, the actual numbers of the military units here of who hacked the campaign. So that's the first thing I wanted to show you. Then in terms of the Trump campaign, and this is actually the second, by the way, the second Russian hacking or the Russian interference section. There's another Russian hacking interference section about how they manipulated social media. I'm not even going to go over that part because this has to do with the collusion. And if you go to page 59 now of your PDF, let me go scrolling. You see here, Trump campaign and dissemination of the hacked materials. And you can see a lot of this is redacted, of course, but it does back up what we knew, that Roger Stone and even Donald Trump Jr. had communications, secret communications with WikiLeaks about the dissemination of the hacked material. You can see there's, well, a lot of the redacted stuff has to do with Roger Stone because he's still being prosecuted. Harm to ongoing manner, there's the whole Corsi thing, and but then down here you also get to see Donald Trump Jr. Specifically had his secret communications with WikiLeaks. So here I'm gonna come back to the camera here for a minute. So collusion just means having secret contacts to do something illegal or dishonest. Secret communications to do something illegal or dishonest. That's, if you look up collusion in the dictionary, that's what you find. Collusion is not a legal thing. So the Mueller report did not find enough evidence that there was a conspiracy between the Trump campaign and the Russians who hacked the material to charge Donald Trump Jr. or with Russian conspiracy, the Russian conspiracy to interfere with the election. But that, if you look, it's because of the First Amendment, basically, that says you can't be criminally charged for just being part of the publishing of the stolen DNC, DCC, Hillary Clinton material. The Russians hacked it. They gave it to WikiLeaks. WikiLeaks published it, and the Trump campaign colluded with WikiLeaks in the publishing, but the publishing isn't a crime. So that's collusion, but it's not a crime. So that is one type of collusion I want to show you. That, and so let's go back to some more collusion here. I'm going to go all the way up back to the title page. This is pages 4 through 6 of the PDF here. Russian government link. So I'm not going to go through all the details here, but I'm going to go through a couple of them. But you can just scroll through this. This is almost 2 pages of other collusion, contacts between the Trump campaign and Russians. It just didn't end up being an agreement to participate in the hacking conspiracy. So, and there are various reasons why none of this was enough to be a crime. And one thing I wanted to talk about, if now I'm going to go over to, and you can see all these, that's pages 4 through 6 there. Now, if we go down to page 138 of the PDF here, I'm almost there, almost there. Am I making you dizzy? You can see that Paul Manafort shared polling data with Konstantin Kilimnik, who shared it with Oleg Deripaska. And the reason that wasn't collusion, that was a conspiracy to hack, you can see here, the office could not reliably determine Manafort's purpose in sharing internal polling data with Kilimnik during the campaign period. Manafort, redacted, did not see a downside to sharing campaign information and told Gates that his role in the campaign would be good for business. Manafort claimed that by sharing campaign information with him, Deripaska might see value in their relationship. But because of questions about Manafort's credibility and our limited ability to gather evidence on what happened to the polling data after it was sent to Kilimnik, the office could not assess whether Kilimnik or others may have given it to collude with the Russian social media interference campaign. So that might have been another link that they haven't been able to find yet. And then finally, the one thing on collusion I wanted to show you before I get to obstruction, and I've been talking a while, I think I might split up obstruction into a second part here. But I wanted to show you the whole Don Jr. Trump Tower meeting on June 9th, 2016. I can, this is actually, because that was one of the big questions a couple weeks ago. I was saying, how is it that Don Jr. could meet with Russians in Trump Tower on June 9th, 2016? He would seem to be soliciting something of value from a foreign national, which is a crime. To solicit something of value from a foreign national for a presidential campaign, that is a crime. So how is it that the Mueller report deals with that? Well, here, this is over on page 194 of the PDF, if I can get there real quick. Oop, too far. You can see the two problems that Mueller couldn't decide if getting dirt on Hillary Clinton from the Russians was a thing of value, which is kind of bogus if you ask me. And then there's also a requirement that the crime be committed knowingly and willfully, which is a pretty high intent, that you basically have to know that you're accepting an illegal campaign contribution. And basically Mueller was saying that Donald Trump Jr. was too ignorant of the law to make that case conclusively, and so they couldn't really prove intent necessarily. But I mean, that is the kind of thing. I used to have this book up behind me, The Divide by Matt Taibbi, which talked about how there's two kinds of justice, one for rich and one for poor. And I think the Mueller report is an example of how rich white people get like the most conservative type of prosecution, where they're not going to prosecute you unless they're 99.9% sure. That is not the way prosecutions happen in most courtrooms. As a former criminal defense attorney, that is my input on this, and I wanted to bring that up. I'm going to go through the rest of the Mueller report. I hope I'm not boring you all, but I am going to give you all of the evidence of obstruction, or at least a quick overview of all the evidence of obstruction. But I think I'm going to put in one of the news summaries here. I actually have 4 news summaries from all the news programs except for CBS. I think the ABC This Week with George Stephanopoulos was the best for actually citing to the report, which is why I figured I'd stick it here in between my analysis of collusion and of obstruction. So here's 2.5 minutes from Martha Raddatz this morning, pointing out to some of the top line conclusions of the report and some good citations that I decided I didn't really have to cover because ABC did over in this clip.
And welcome to This Week. After nearly 2 years, the Mueller report has finally been made public, giving us all a chance to review the special counsel's findings. The president's opinion seems to have changed very little, repeating his now familiar refrain of no collusion, no obstruction. but it's not so clear-cut. Mueller's investigation did not find that the Trump campaign conspired or coordinated with Russia to interfere in the 2016 election. But the special counsel's team did find a series of contacts between Trump campaign officials and individuals with ties to the Russian government. And the report paints a picture of a president who committed acts that were, quote, capable of exerting undue influence over law enforcement investigations, putting pressure on his White House counsel to fire Robert Mueller, asking former Attorney General Jeff Sessions to unrecuse himself from the Russia investigation, and asking the Deputy Attorney General to mislead the public about why the president fired former FBI Director James Comey. But the special counsel concluded Trump's efforts to influence the investigation, quote, were mostly unsuccessful, largely because the persons who surrounded the president declined to carry out orders or accede to his requests. The special counsel's findings also detail a culture of mistruths at the White House from the top down. The president falsely claiming reports about his administration were fake news, his staff misleading the public multiple times about Comey's firing, and the president himself dictating a misleading statement to the public about that 2016 Trump Tower meeting. Now, as we brace for what could be a long legal battle over the full report and Congress's role, these key lines could determine what happens next. If we had confidence after a thorough investigation of the facts that the president clearly did not commit obstruction of justice, we would so state. Based on the facts and the applicable legal standards, we are unable to reach that judgment. Accordingly, while this report does not conclude that the president committed a crime, it also does not exonerate him. For more on all this, we're joined now by Counselor to the President, Kellyanne Conway. Good morning, Kellyanne.
And I will have another longer Kellyanne Conway clip coming up, clip 14. But like I said, I thought that was the best, most in-depth description of the parts of the Mueller report. But it's still not as in-depth as the points that I'm showing you. I mean, there's so many facts, so many bad facts for the president in the report. And, you know, I guess there was this terrorist bombing in Sri Lanka that took up some of the coverage on all the shows. I'm not showing any of that. And so that may have shortened their coverage, but I have some disappointments in the rest of the media, and especially NBC News' Meet the Press and Chuck Todd, which I'll get to in a little bit. But I do want to, now having shown one news summary, I'm going to do my own little, having shown all the evidence of collusion there, even if it didn't rise to the level of a criminal conspiracy with the Russians to hack and or to interfere with our elections. I want to show you, you know, I think it's true that Bob Mueller did not find evidence of a crime on the collusion side, and I'm a little disappointed about that. I mean, not that I want our presidential administration to have colluded with the Russians, but I'm disappointed in that. I think there was a lot of strong evidence there. Although it's actually, in some ways, it's kind of like the Paul Manafort thing. You know, when I'm talking about the divide here, I was just talking about this before, that it's not so much that I wish, you know, for Paul Manafort, I kind of wish he had a longer sentence. It seems like, or I kind of wish, it's not that I wish that Paul Manafort got a longer sentence from that first judge. I just wish that other defendants got lower sentences. And so that's the thing I want to say, you know, in terms of the prosecution being so conservative in terms of wanting to be extra sure before bringing charges. I actually wish all prosecutors were like that, not that this prosecutor wasn't. So I just wanted to make that clear. But on the obstruction charge, I don't think that Robert Mueller is telling us that there was no obstruction of justice. You know, that was the principal conclusion a couple weeks ago, that that they couldn't they couldn't establish, or that they decided not to reach a traditional prosecutorial judgment. Well, I mean, what they did is they basically laid it out for Congress, and I'm gonna go over some of here. First, here's from the back to the Mueller report here. This is page 209 of the PDF. It's the table of contents of volume 2. And if you look here at the factual results of the obstruction investigation, the campaign's response to reports about Russian support for Trump, A, there's no obstruction analysis at the end of that section. But B, the president's conduct concerning the investigation of Flynn. C, the president's reaction to public confirmation of the FBI's Russia investigation. And then I'm not even going to read all of these to you. D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K. That's 10 different areas. In each of those, they end with an analysis of obstruction that basically talks about the three elements that basically talks about the three elements of obstruction. Actually, I should probably find that for you here. Oh no, I opened the wrong here. So it talks about whether there was an obstructive act, whether there was so did the president do something to try to obstruct justice? Was there a nexus to a proceeding? Because if you're obstructing justice, you have to be obstructing something going on in the justice system, a proceeding. It could be the special counsel's investigation. It could be a trial, a grand jury investigation. It could be any kind. There are various kinds of proceedings. So there has to be a nexus to a proceeding. Then there has to be intent to obstruct. For all of these 10 areas, you'll see that Robert Mueller went through and gave an analysis. Actually, the editor of Lawfare, the managing editor of Lawfare, whose name is, let me see if I can, I put a link down in the video description to his tweet where he made a chart. His name is Quinta Jurecic, I think is how you pronounce that. And here's that me now? Can you hear me now? Okay, sorry. I forgot to turn the microphone on for this. So you can see this is the chart that Quinta Jurecic tweeted, and I put a link down in the video description to this tweet, and it goes B through K, and that goes back to the parts of the Mueller report, and it looks at obstructive act, the nexus, and the intent, and green means that Mueller found yes on all of those. In fact, the only one that Mueller didn't find a yes on was G. Which, as you can see over here in the Mueller report, why is that not showing up right? Not happy about that. So G is the president's efforts to prevent disclosure of emails about the June 9th, 2016 meeting between Russians and senior campaign officials. And the reason, I just realized that the framing of the stuff I was showing you, it was cutting off. I thought the top was higher up or whatever. So I don't know if the stuff I was showing you didn't make sense, and whatever. That's a little upsetting. But the reason there was, if you look at that tweeted chart, there was no nexus in G. There's no obstructive act, no nexus, and no intent, is because that was all about wasn't about obstructing justice. It was about obstructing the press. It was when Donald Trump wrote that fake account of the June 9th, 2016 tower meeting between Don Jr. and the Russians, and said it was primarily about abortion. Well, he wasn't obstructing justice because the grand jury was going to find out about that anyway. He was just trying to obstruct the press, and that's why there was no obstruction of justice in that case. But there was a few things that are unclear, according to this chart on the Lawfare blog, and I actually kind of agree with this analysis. It's basically what Robert Mueller said. I invite you to go and read that. And then the couple other points I wanted to make about obstruction of justice before I move on here. First, from page 369 here. See if I can get to it. Here we go. This is page 157. Oh, and I'm trying to line this up so that you're reading what I'm reading. Okay, so starting here, it says, this is the thing about the underlying crime on obstruction of justice. So just because they didn't find conspiracy with Russia, does that mean that Trump is scot-free on obstruction of justice because there was no underlying crime? Well, here you can see, no, the evidence does point to a range of other possible personal motives animating the president's conduct. These include concerns that continued investigation would call into question the legitimacy of his election and potential uncertainty about whether certain events, such as advance notice of WikiLeaks' release of hacked information, could be seen as criminal activity. So he might want to he didn't want his election to be found illegitimate. He thought that some of the things he did might have been a crime, even if they didn't end up being found a crime. So there's definitely, even if there's not an underlying crime, there is still good motive for obstruction of justice. And then I wanted to show you on page 392 here, I can get to that real quick, of the PDF. This is page 180. And on 392, this is the last thing. Let me get this so you hopefully can see it all here. So, in sum, contrary to the position taken by the President's counsel, we concluded that in light of Supreme Court precedent governing separation of powers issues, we had a valid basis for investigating the conduct obstruction of justice. In our view, the application of the obstruction statutes would not impermissibly burden the President's performance of his Article 2 function to supervise prosecutorial conduct or to remove inferior law enforcement officers. You'll hear Rudy Giuliani arguing the opposite in a minute. And then the protection of the criminal justice system from corrupt acts by any person, including the President, accords with the fundamental principles of our government that no person in this country is so high that he is above the law. So that is the last thing that Mueller said in his report before he gets to the conclusion. So that can tell you, I think, what Mueller wanted to happen next on obstruction. That's a clue, I think. And then the last thing I want to show you is on page 394 of the PDF here. From the conclusion, let me make sure I have this. See, I got this stupid thing. So there. Okay, here's the conclusion. So we are unable, it says, the evidence we obtained about the President's actions and intent present difficult issues and would need to be resolved if we were making a traditional prosecutorial judgment. At the same time, if we had confidence after a thorough investigation of the facts that the President clearly did not commit obstruction of justice, we would so state. So based on the facts and the applicable legal standards, they're unable to clear the president. So even though they didn't conclude he committed a crime, it didn't exonerate him. And that is basically, I think, another message from Mueller to the Congress and the public about what he thinks should be done with this long outline of 10 different episodes of obstruction of justice where he's shown the obstructive act, he's shown the nexus to a proceeding, and he's shown the presidential intent. He's basically laid out what he would lay out to a grand jury to indict to Congress. For someone with criminal justice experience, it looks like a roadmap to impeachment. And so for those who say no collusion, no obstruction, I think I've shown you there's lots of evidence of collusion and obstruction. Now I'm going to move on to the other three news summaries. First, Meet the Press laid out some of the facts, but I think concentrated more on the reactions and the politics. This is much longer than the one I showed you from ABC. No more. I'm not going to scroll through the Mueller report with you anymore. Now it's just going to be the regular kind of clip show, starting with the NBC News Meet the Press news summary that I'll talk about with you a little more after we watch it together over here.
Now to the Mueller report. In so many ways, the rollout reflected the divisions in this country. It was a tale of two reports, or more accurately, two tales of one report, with a divided public free to choose its version of the truth. On one hand, there was President Trump and his supporters high-fiving, celebrating with the help of the president's new attorney general, who framed the report before its release as an exoneration of a frustrated and angry president. On the other hand, there was the report itself, which at 448 pages, including many redactions, is a far cry from the president's favorite misleading no collusion, no obstruction soundbite. It describes a campaign eager to accept the help of a hostile foreign power, Russia, and a president who later worked furiously to obstruct the investigation. In fact, Mr. Trump may have been saved from a formal obstruction charge by aides who saved him from himself. The Mueller team writes, the president's efforts to influence the investigation were mostly unsuccessful, but that is largely because the persons who surrounded the president declined to carry out orders or accede to his requests. Then there is this now iconic closing sentence. While this report does not conclude that the president committed a crime, it also does not exonerate him. It's a line that gives ammunition to both sides of the Trump divide, but one that is likely to cloud the president's reputation whether or not he is reelected.
We need the whole report, including the underlying documents, unredacted.
The 448-page report details an aggressive and ultimately successful attempt by Vladimir Putin to interfere in the 2016 election and destabilize the United States.
I have nothing to do with Russia.
I know from having been on the campaign that there was no contact with Russians, no discussion with Russians.
But the report lays out scores of links between the Russian government and the Trump campaign. Among them, campaign chairman Paul Manafort regularly shared polling data with a Russian intelligence agent and received a peace plan for Ukraine that Manafort acknowledged to the special counsel's office was a backdoor way for Russia to control part of eastern Ukraine. Then there are the ties between the Trump campaign and WikiLeaks.
WikiLeaks, I love WikiLeaks.
The report details advanced knowledge of WikiLeaks releases by members of the campaign, including the president, who is described as taking a phone call and then telling Deputy Campaign Chair Rick Gates that more releases of damaging information would be coming. There was the June 2016 Trump Tower meeting when Donald Trump Jr., Jared Kushner, and Paul Manafort met with Russians to get dirt on Hillary Clinton. And remember this.
To be clear, Mr. Trump has no financial relationships with any Russian oligarchs.
That's what he said. That's what I said. That's obviously what our position is.
In fact, there were many contacts arranged at the highest levels, including a meeting in the Seychelles Islands between the head of Russia's sovereign wealth fund and Trump ally Eric Prince. On obstruction, Mueller lays out 10 possible episodes, including the firing of FBI Director James Comey, the president's attempt to get Attorney General Jeff Sessions to unrecuse himself.
He took the job, and then he said, I'm going to recuse myself. I said, what kind of a man is this?
And telling White House counsel Don McGahn to fire Mueller. McGahn refused, telling then Chief of Staff Reince Priebus that the president had asked him to do crazy ass. McGahn threatened to resign. In fact, the day Mueller was appointed, May 17th, 2017, President Trump, quote, slumped back in his chair and said, oh my God, this is terrible. This is the end of my presidency. I'm effed. Adding later, this is the worst thing that ever happened to me. Though the Attorney General claims
the White House fully cooperated with the special counsel's investigation.
In fact, the report details how individuals lied or deleted communications, and the president refused to sit for an interview with the special counsel. President Trump responded to written questions with some version of "I do not recall" or "I do not remember" 37 times. Now, some Democrats are pressing for impeachment proceedings.
We have a Constitution of the United States, and it says when a president engages in this kind of activity, then it's time for impeachment.
But House Democratic leaders, led by Speaker Nancy Pelosi, are putting the brakes on, saying one step at a time.
The avenue is not impeachment. The avenue is further disclosure to the American people.
And joining me now is the president's personal attorney, Rudy Giuliani. Mr. Mayor, welcome back.
And I will have a few Rudy Giuliani clips coming up. But actually, watching that clip for the third time, I watch all these clips 3 times. Once when I watch the show, once when I capture it, and then once when I watch it with all of you. And watching it the third time, they did have a significant amount of information about the bad facts in the Mueller report. It's more Chuck Todd's interview, especially with Rudy Giuliani, that's right, with Rudy Giuliani, that I thought was he didn't really bring up the bad facts at all. And the CNN State of the Union news summary, in contrast to the last two, much shorter, just gives you the bare bone idea of what's going on. It came after a longer report on the terrorism in Sri Lanka, so I think that may be why. Like I said, some of my letdown on the Sunday morning news analysis shows, not giving like a real detailed look at all the bad facts in the Mueller report that really make the Trump administration look like, I mean, I have read the Mueller report. It's at a link down in the video description. I defy you to read that whole report and come off thinking that Donald Trump should still be president. I mean, give me a break. Give me a break. It's just awful. I mean, it's just way below the standard. I mean, I know a lot of presidents have done a lot of bad stuff, but I defy you to read the Mueller report and come up with that conclusion. So anyway, in the CNN State of the Union news summary, I'm going off on a tangent there, but in the CNN State of the Union news summary, it's just a very brief summary, although they do take kind of a dig at Donald Trump for maybe not having read the Mueller report. Which I'll discuss with you a little more after we watch that brief news summary from CNN State of the Union. Jake Tapper doesn't say what the State of the Union is, because I cut out the part where they talked about Sri Lanka, and the State of the Union was actually, hopes and prayers for the people of Sri Lanka, which here's the Mueller report part over here.
Let's turn now back to the long-awaited release of the Robert Mueller report. President Trump is claiming total exoneration after the partially redacted document was released to Congress and the public, but maybe he didn't read the whole report. The special counsel says there is insufficient evidence anyone affiliated with the Trump campaign engaged in criminal conspiracy with the Russians, but it also details what even some Republican critics are assailing as a culture of lies at the White House and unethical actions on the Trump campaign on the subject of possible obstruction of justice by the president. Mueller did not come to a conclusion. He seemed to leave it up to Congress to decide. And joining me now, President Trump's personal attorney, the former mayor of New York.
And as I said, we will be getting Rudy Giuliani, but I think I pretty much discussed that news summary before I showed it. The final news summary I want to show you is from Fox News Sunday. CBS's Face the Nation didn't do a news summary, although they did have news from Sri Lanka. But this news summary, I have to say, I actually got a copyright claim from Fox News for a clip I used of one of their news summaries a few weeks back, where maybe I should have been more critical because, now I'm in a fair use fight with Fox News over the use of that clip. And that week I actually gave them some credit for doing a good news summary. This news summary is awful. This news summary, and I'm not just saying that so that I have a fair use media criticism defense to the use of this copyrighted material, because here you'll see first a very brief news summary on this week from Chris Wallace, where he talks about how Trump is on break in Florida, but there's no break from his celebration of his supposed exoneration and attacking aides, mainly his former White House counsel Don McGahn, while Democrats are split on the idea of impeachment. Nothing about the bad facts about the Trump administration I was just talking about before the CNN State of the Union clip, that if you read this report, you have to come to the conclusion that there's something very wrong with the Trump presidency. And none of those bad facts are in Chris Wallace's brief summary, and then he hands it over to Kevin Corke, who basically gives a longer version of those same points about Trump celebrating exoneration, attacking former aides, and Democrats being split. And where are all the bad facts about the Trump administration that just came out in the Mueller report? Not in this Fox News summary, as I'll discuss with you after we watch that clip together over here.
Back here at home, President Trump is at his Florida retreat for the holidays, but he's not taking a break from both celebrating what he calls exoneration by the Mueller report, while at the same time attacking former aides who he says misled the special counsel. Meanwhile, Democrats are split on whether to push for impeachment or move on to other issues. In a moment, we'll speak with the president's personal attorney, Rudy Giuliani, and later House Intelligence Committee Chair Adam Schiff. But first, let's bring in Kevin Corke at the White House with the latest developments. Kevin.
Chris, the president already busy on Twitter once again this day, and frankly, a real pendulum of emotion following the release of that redacted Mueller report, swinging from vindication and exultation to downright frustration over its genesis and some of its underlying evidence.
This should never happen to another president again.
President Trump's insistence that he did not collude with the Russians to sway the 2016 election is a message he not only reiterated once again in person following the release of the redacted Mueller report, his frustration boiled over on Twitter, where he called it the end result of the greatest witch hunt in U.S. political history. No collusion, no obstruction. But Mr. Trump also used the social media platform to fume at some of the report's characterizations, particularly as it relates to obstruction of justice. Fabricated and totally untrue, he tweeted, adding that some of the statements in that report were, quote, total BS and only given to make the other person look good or me to look bad. The latter an apparent reference to former White House counsel Don McGahn, whose name appears on 66 of the report's 488 pages and was, according to the report, routinely criticized by the president for his persistent, detailed note-taking. Still, the report's findings did little to quell the political uprising on Capitol Hill, where congressional Democrats have threatened to use it as a launching point for more investigation into the Trump presidency.
It is clear the special counsel's office conducted an incredibly thorough investigation in order to preserve the evidence for future investigators.
Future investigations, including a possible impeachment proceeding. By the way, Chairman Nadler has already issued a subpoena for the unredacted special counsel report, including its underlying evidence and grand jury material by May 1st. That's a request, Chris, the DOJ is calling premature and unnecessary.
Kevin Corke reporting from...
Premature and unnecessary is the subpoena to get the full Mueller report. That's the last word from Kevin Corke in what could almost have been a news summary created by the Trump administration. I mean, maybe not quite that bad, but where were all the bad facts from the Mueller report? It was basically the Trump reaction, his celebration of supposed exoneration, his, the Trump clip about that, and then attack on Don McGahn, and then Democrats split on impeachment. What happened to all the evidence of collusion in the Mueller report? What happened to all the evidence of obstruction in the Mueller report? Came up very little on Fox News Sunday this morning, and certainly not in that news summary, which was obviously the worst of all the news summaries, even worse than the CBS Face the Nation news summary. They didn't even have a news summary, so that's how bad it was. So now I want to move on to the only really good confrontational question that Chuck Todd asked Rudy Giuliani in his Meet the Press interview. This is kind of a backwards criticism, I guess. At a link down in the video description, you can see the source of all my clips, including you can see the full Meet the Press episode and the whole Rudy Giuliani interview, where you'll see Chuck Todd did not bring up any of the bad facts. He talked about some of the legal arguments and conclusions in the Mueller report, but the many, many bad facts did not come up in his cross-examination of Donald Trump's lawyer. Basically, the best cross-examination question is the one I picked in this clip, where he talked about Appendix G to the Mueller report, where Donald Trump answers questions in writing. And I have to analyze this a little. I'm going to go back and read this again, but I think this actually may be the one place where they forgot to redact, because in the premises of some of the questions, they give information about like Roger Stone and some other things that are redacted in other parts of the report. I mean, they don't give it's like the premise of the question says things that are redacted in other parts of the report, I'm pretty sure. But that's not what this question is about. This is about how many times Donald Trump said, "I don't remember," which is pretty obstructive, especially in written answers, because there's no ability to follow up. And Chuck Todd this is something that Chris Wallace also did in a clip I didn't take, where Chuck Todd pointed out that Donald Trump and Rudy Giuliani both attacked Hillary Clinton for how many times she said, "I don't remember," when she testified to the FBI about her supposed email case. And anyway, here's Rudy Giuliani being questioned by Chuck Todd about that, with a quote from the past over here.
You keep bringing up Hillary Clinton. You said something very interesting during the campaign about Hillary Clinton and the FBI interview that she was a part of. You said this: "She claims 37 times to the FBI she can't remember things. This has to be a lie. Otherwise, she has such a bad memory. She should really be going somewhere for memory lessons, not running for President of the United States." In the questions that you helped the president answer of the special counsel, you used some form, or the president uses some form of not recalling or not remembering. I think the number was 37 times.
I think it was 22 times, but in any event, and Jim Comey did 201 times. And it wasn't I don't remember all the time. I'd have to count that I don't remember. It's to my best recollection. I will never let a witness answer a question.
So he wasn't as forthcoming as he could be. The president was not as forthcoming as he could have been.
He was as forthcoming as the question demanded. I don't allow any witness to volunteer. It's a terrible thing to do, and that's the way they trap you for perjury. I'll give you an example. The president says that the events described by Michael Cohen, the correct version is the first one he gave under oath, not the second. Michael Cohen is about as big a liar as I've ever seen. I could rip him apart on a witness stand. The guy lied on television. The guy lied in the last hearing before the Congress, and when he said, "I didn't ask for a job."
Do you represent the most truthful client you've ever had in Donald Trump?
I represent probably the most important client I've ever had with regard to the future of the United States. Yes, because he's been, I think, a great president.
Do you feel like he's truthful?
I believe he's truthful, yeah, as much as you can be in a world in which every single word you say is picked apart. And if you say 4 and it's actually 5, they claim you're lying.
I want to get you to respond to another part of this. If we had confidence after a...
So, yeah, I mean, there was one good cross-examination there, and then he did try to get Rudy Giuliani to admit that Donald Trump is, like, the least truthful client he's ever had, but... didn't get really an honest response on that one, I guess. But the next clip I want to show you actually is even worse in some ways than Chuck Todd not asking Rudy Giuliani about all the bad facts in the Mueller report about the Trump administration and what Trump did and what his campaign did. Here you'll see Chuck Todd actually misstates what Mueller said about the intent to obstruct. Remember, before I showed you, and hold on, this is going to take a second to get my screen. Okay, so you remember here in the oh no, wrong thing. It says in this investigation there was no underlying crime, but the evidence does point to a range here. See, you can of other possible personal motives that could be the motive for obstruction of justice. Remember, I showed you that before. Well, here is Chuck Todd misstating what it actually says in the Mueller report, questioning Jerry Nadler about the motivation for obstruction of justice. And then there's another reason that this is bad questioning of Jerry Nadler that I'll talk about after we watch this clip together over here.
I'll read you this part, though, because I do think that you keep bringing up Hillary Clinton. You said something very interesting during the campaign about Hillary Clinton and the FBI interview that she was a part of. You said this: she claims 37 times to the FBI she can't remember things. This has to be a lie. Otherwise, she has such a bad memory.
Wait, that's the... Sorry. Mistake. That's the clip I just showed you of... Rudy Giuliani. Here's the Jerry Nadler clip I was talking about over here.
I'll read you this part, though, because I do think this is the complicating factor, all this. Also from the report. Unlike cases in which a subject engages in obstruction of justice to cover up a crime, the evidence we obtained did not establish that the president was involved in an underlying crime related to Russian election interference. Although the obstruction statutes do not require proof of such a crime, the absence of that evidence affects the analysis of the president's intent and requires consideration of other possible motives for his conduct. They go on to state that whether you think it's distasteful or not, a political motivation, meaning the president concerned about his political standing, might not be an illegal reasoning behind sort of having concern about this case.
No. The Mueller report goes on to state that there may be other considerations that are not crimes that nonetheless are predicates for an obstruction of justice, and that happens all the time to save your reputation for other reasons. What Mueller says, and this is where Barr deliberately, or one of the places where Barr deliberately misled the American people, what Mueller says is that although a thorough FBI investigation might very well show the evidence of obstruction of justice by the president, we're not going to do that because of the Department of Justice legal opinion that a sitting president cannot be indicted, and it would be unfair to lay out the facts justifying an indictment without giving the president the opportunity in a trial to clear his name. So because of that legal doctrine, we're not going to charge him with obstruction. Barr misinterpreted that, or misrepresented that, I should say, to say that they didn't find obstruction. There is plenty of evidence of obstruction, and they say in so many words, if we pursued this, we might put ourselves in an impossible position because we would then have to charge the president with a crime which the Justice Department won't permit us to do.
Do you assume that the reason...
So, yeah, that was, like I said, a misstatement by Chuck Todd about what the Mueller report said on Trump's intent to obstruct justice. And Jerry Nadler did a good job there pointing out the reason. You know, I talked when I did my analysis of the Mueller report of all the signals from Robert Mueller to the Congress that here's my roadmap to impeachment. Well, that was the one missing piece I forgot to mention, that Jerry Nadler, the chair of the House Judiciary Committee, so he's the one who's in charge of impeachment, he stated it very well that Mueller also made clear he wasn't pursuing Trump criminally because of the policy of the Office of Legal Counsel, the Justice Department policy that a sitting president can't be indicted. And that's why he didn't even want to say that he should be indicted. That's what Jerry Nadler was saying. Otherwise, you have a whole roadmap to Trump's obstruction of justice for Congress, the roadmap to impeachment that I was talking about earlier. And then I have one more clip here of Chuck Todd that I wanted to criticize. I was talking about earlier where he asked Jerry Nadler about impeachment and does not do a good job of following up. Maybe he's running out of time. I don't know. I'll talk about that a little more with you. This is just the last, 30 seconds of the interview over here.
Do you think this is impeachable?
Yeah, I do. I do think that this, if proven, which hasn't been proven yet, some of this, if proven, some of this would be impeachable, yes.
All right.
Obstruction of justice, if proven, would be impeachable.
And you're going to go about to see if you can prove it?
Well, we're going to see where the facts lead us.
All right. Congressman Gerald Nadler, Democrat from New York. Thanks for coming on and sharing your views, sir.
Thank you.
All right.
So, yeah, that was the end of the interview. And he said the obstruction of justice, if proven, is impeachable. But if you've been watching Jerry Nadler over the last month, he's kind of been backing off on whether there's proof of obstruction of justice. What Chuck Todd should have asked him about is, here's a clip from March 10th, just a little over a month ago. Jerry Nadler being much stronger on whether there is proof of obstruction of justice, talking to George Stephanopoulos on ABC's This Week over here.
Do you think the president obstructed justice?
Yes, I do.
It's
very clear that the president obstructed justice. It's very clear. 1,100 times he referred to the Mueller investigation as a witch hunt. He tried to, he tried to protect Flynn from being investigated by the FBI. He fired Comey in order to stop the Russian thing, as he told NBC News. He's dangled he's threatened. He's intimidated witnesses in public.
So, yeah, back on March 10th, Jerry Nadler seemed pretty clear that Trump obstructed justice. Today he said that that is impeachable if it's proven that he obstructed justice, which a month ago he said was pretty clearly proven. So put those two clips together, and Chuck Todd maybe should have put those two clips together, because it seems like the chair of the House Judiciary Committee in charge of impeachment thinks that Trump obstructed justice, and that's an impeachable offense. So the next clips I want to move on to are the three other Rudy Giuliani clips I have for you. Two from CNN State of the Union, where I think Jake Tapper did a much better job of cross-examining Rudy Giuliani, and then one clip from Fox News Sunday. This first clip from CNN State of the Union, clip 11, if you're following along at home on my clip list, you'll see that this is, I think, got a lot of play as something, I showed you the clip at the beginning where he said there's no evidence, just stuff. And I thought that was pretty remarkable and funny, and so I showed it as my political comedy clip. But at the beginning of this clip, you'll see Rudy Giuliani says there's nothing wrong with accepting help from Russia in the 2016 campaign. And what he means to say, and you'll see he says for the rest of the clip, is there's nothing illegal about it. But then if you listen carefully, pay attention to the beginning of the clip, because he doesn't say there's nothing illegal. He says nothing wrong with accepting help from Russia. And then Jake Tapper points out to him many times, well, that is wrong. And he keeps saying, oh, but it's not illegal, which I'll discuss a little more with you after we watch that 90-second clip of the Rudy Giuliani interview on CNN State of the Union this morning over here.
Oh, no, there's nothing wrong with taking information from Russians.
There's nothing wrong with taking information.
It depends on where it came from. It depends on where it came from. You're assuming that the giving of information is a campaign contribution. You read the report carefully. The report says we can't conclude that because the law is pretty much against that. People get information from this person, that person?
So you would have accepted information from Russians against a client, against a candidate, if you were running in the presidential election?
I probably wouldn't. I wasn't asked. I would have advised, just out of excess of caution, don't do it. I'll give you another thing.
But you're saying there was nothing wrong with doing that.
There's no crime.
I'm not talking about crime. I'm talking about.
We're going to get into morality?
Yeah.
Well, that isn't what prosecutors look at, morality.
No, but that's what Mitt Romney. But that's what Mitt Romney is referring to.
But this didn't become an international scandal because of immorality. It became an international scandal because the president was accused of violating the law falsely, and now nobody wants to try to figure out who did it, because that's the real wrongdoing here. And the reality is.
But you don't think this is immoral or unethical to take?
Well, suppose help? I do.
Yeah.
I'm going to prosecute people for immoral.
I'm not talking about the
prosecution. I'm going to go look at every. I'd like to take a good look at Romney's campaign and see if there were any immoral or unethical things done by the people working for him that he didn't know about. If there weren't, then it was the only campaign in history, because he's maybe as holier than the holiest one. There's no campaign in history that hasn't done that.
You think that there shouldn't be a high standard for?
And one thing I forgot to mention before I showed that clip is that this all started with Jake Tapper reading this attack on Trump from Senator Mitt Romney of Utah. And you see Rudy Giuliani did some attacks of his own back on Romney, and I cut out a lot of those attacks that came before that clip and after that clip about how, what a venal, awful person Mitt Romney is, apparently, and Rudy Giuliani knows, because he was in a campaign against him for president back in 2012. So anyway, that whole thing there, I think that was kind of ridiculous from Rudy Giuliani, the way that he started off saying there's nothing wrong with taking help from Russia and then switched it all around to the legality question. And then this next clip is the longer context of there's no evidence in the Mueller report. It's just stuff that other people might call evidence, but I'm going to use a different word, and the only word I can come up with is stuff. And it starts with Jake Tapper pointing out that there is evidence of collusion. That, like I said in my title, collusion, ! Obstruction, ! Because there's plenty of evidence, even if it doesn't rise to the level of a criminal charge beyond a reasonable doubt. And you'll see Rudy Giuliani going back and forth on, what is evidence, and trying to bring it back to this whole, oranges conspiracy, the oranges of the, he says origins, the beginnings, of the investigation, and and at one point he says the whole thing is lies. The report that exonerates Trump supposedly is all calumny and lies, and I'll talk about that a little more after we watch that longer Rudy Giuliani clip from CNN's State of the Union with Jake Tapper this morning over here.
The candidate. The question is, did Donald Trump, let's call that collude with the Russians? The answer is he didn't collude with them, he didn't conspire with them, he didn't coordinate with them, and all of that was run against him. Wait now. Yeah. All of that was run against him, 2 FBI investigations has found out to be false. And now that it's over.
Well, insufficient evidence.
And now.
Insufficient evidence.
Well, no, not on collusion.
Right. They said they could not find they could not find sufficient evidence of criminal conspiracy.
They couldn't find a single piece of evidence for anything. Hacking, dissemination.
There's an entire volume of evidence. It just doesn't rise to criminality.
There's an entire volume of stuff. Not of evidence.
You can call it stuff, but Mitt Romney obviously finds it offensive that fellow citizens working on a campaign welcomed help from Russia.
But you're quoting Mitt Romney like he's an unbiased source. This man has a whole history of awful things said about Donald Trump, including he's morally unfit to be president, before he ever knew anything about this.
You just said you wouldn't accept help from the Russians if you were
I don't know if I would or I wouldn't. The legal advice I would give is out of an excess of caution, don't do it. But maybe that's informed somewhat by what is going on right now and what we've learned since then. The reality is you're picking on a minor point when the major point is he was pursued for years for a false charge. 2 FBI investigations, one with 4 affidavits for electronic surveillance that turn out to be fraudulent. That's a big crime. Now, it turns out he didn't do it. Isn't anybody in the media interested in how did this happen? Is this just an accident?
With the investigation into the president, how did it happen?
Yeah.
We know the
no, you don't know.
The volume.
No, you don't. You
lays
never
out the detail of how and why it started.
No, they didn't.
It started with George Papadopoulos and somebody approaching him.
You never would have started an investigation of a major party candidate, based on
the DNC was hacked, and John Podesta was spearphished, and all these emails were illegally.
But those 2 things are disconnected. Trump had nothing to do with that. No,
they're not disconnected. That's what they were investigating. Russian election.
You're fighting it so hard.
I'm just pointing out the facts in the report.
But there's a prejudice. I got to tell you, it's just assumed that anything about him we're going to magnify it, and anything about the other side we don't look at. The whole situation with Papadopoulos, to a trained investigator, is extremely, unbelievably suspicious. The man is given one little piece of information. The Russians have Hillary Clinton's by a Maltese counterintelligence guy.
Okay. By Mifsud.
Yes. And then he repeats it a month later to an Australian guy with a very shady background, big contributor to Hillary Clinton, even though he's an Australian.
Contributor to Hillary Clinton, he's an Australian. You can't contribute
I think he's a citizen now. Not illegal. He raised money for her, helped to get money. To the foundation. I'm sorry.
To the Clinton Foundation. Can I ask you a question about Don
Wait, I want to finish the thought. It's a really important thought. That man is told the same information that Mifsud gave him. And all it says is the Russians
have information, these emails from Hillary Clinton.
That does not justify.
But it was true, and it was an attack on the United States.
But it doesn't justify an investigation of Donald Trump as candidate for president of the United States. There is right now as much evidence that Obama may have known about the Steele dossier and affidavits as Trump might have known about that. In fact, more, because there's a text between Strzok and Page.
I don't know anything.
Saying, yes, you do. Strzok and Page said the administration.
Obama knew.
They said the Obama administration is on top of this.
I want to go.
I didn't say he knew. Yeah. I said there's evidence that would suggest you should follow it up and find out.
Okay.
I will investigate him.
I want to ask you, because you've been talking about Don.
If we did that, this place
So, yeah, I think I pretty much criticized that clip before I showed it as to what Rudy Giuliani said, and it's fairly ridiculous. But I have one more Rudy Giuliani clip I want to show you. This is from Fox News Sunday. I criticized Fox News Sunday and Chris Wallace and Kevin Corke in the news summary earlier for never bringing up any of the bad facts about the Trump administration, about collusion, about obstruction, anywhere in their news summary. Well, basically the only place that Chris Wallace ever brought it up was when he questioned Rudy Giuliani. He mentioned one bad fact, that Trump told his White House counsel, Don McGahn, to fire Mueller multiple times. And he brought that up in his questioning of Rudy Giuliani in this next clip, which I will discuss with you after we watch that clip together over here.
Here, the issue is, did the president obstruct justice or not? Wait, let me just ask I understand you're champing at the bit. Let me just ask the question. In June of 2017, the Mueller report says that the president called White House counsel Don McGahn twice on the same weekend, and he told him, and this is a quote from McGahn, call Rod Rosenstein, the deputy attorney general who is overseeing the special counsel, call Rod, tell Rod that Mueller has conflicts and can't be the special counsel. McGahn recalled the president telling him Mueller has to go. The only reason that doesn't happen is because McGahn threatens to resign and refuses to carry out what he considers to be a Saturday night massacre.
Okay, now you want my answer?
Yes.
And you'll let me give it?
Sure.
Okay, so, number one, had he done it, it would not have been obstruction of justice, because there were very good reasons to fire Mueller, and the president has the absolute plenary power.
Wait, what was the reason to fire Mueller? He'd only been on the job a month.
Mueller hired a staff in which he had people that I would find very, very questionable as people that should be investigating Donald Trump. He hired the chief counsel to the Clinton Foundation. Absurd. He hired someone who had been a very, very strong partisan of Hillary Clinton, been at her going-away party, whatever that was, and had a history of ethical misconduct, unethical
But according to the Mueller report,
Can I finish, Chris? It's a complex answer. You asked a complex question. I got to give a complex answer. I mean, there were a lot of reasons why it was...
Well, okay, but I understand what you're saying is that the investigation was biased. Okay.
Okay. I know you don't want a long answer, but, you know, in fairness,
I understand what you're saying is the investigation was biased.
No, what I'm saying is you could perceive it that way. That would give you a good faith reason to fire him. And also, he demonstrated in the case of Comey that he could fire someone and did not interfere in the investigation, because immediately it was taken up by someone else. He told Lester Holt that he realized...
Well, sir, I'm not asking about Comey. I'm asking about Mueller.
I'm pointing out what his prior conduct. He removed Comey, and he said, I realized it'll lengthen the investigation. And now if he had fired Mueller, he would have expected somebody else came and took it over. The guy had conflicts of interest. The guy hired a highly partisan, biased
It also had come out. It also had come out. I understand you're trying to make the case, but we do have limited time here.
I'm not trying to make the case. I'm trying to tell you there's an alternative explanation.
There's another alternative explanation which Mueller makes. And Mueller's explanation is that 2 days earlier, the report has come out in the paper that now Mueller is investigating him for obstruction of justice, and for the first time in this investigation, for the first time, the president directly is a target of the investigation.
Chris, what you're doing is you're taking the Mueller report, which is a prosecutor's version of what happened. You're giving it full credit, and you're not giving me a chance to explain the other side, which is very, very strong and was left out by the prosecutor. I think that's unfair in a case of this magnitude, not to tell the other side.
I'm asking you about the other side.
You're not giving me a chance to answer it.
We don't need to talk about James Comey.
Well, it's 2 pages.
What?
It's two or three pages of calumny and lies and distortion. It takes a little while. For example...
You think that's what the report is? Calumny, lies, and distortion?
In certain respects.
That was the calumny, lies, and distortions clip. For some reason, I thought he had said calumny, lies, and distortions in the previous clip. And kudos to Rudy Giuliani for using the word calumny. It's not a word you hear a lot, so that's at least one positive thing I can say about Rudy Giuliani. But the rest of it was pretty bogus. And kudos to Chris Wallace there for bringing up what it says in the Mueller report. Here I'm going back to my Mueller report thing about this is on page 301 of the PDF, page 89 of volume 2, if you're looking at it that way, about intent and Donald Trump's obstructive intent when he told his counsel Don McGahn to fire Robert Mueller. Substantial evidence indicates that the president's attempts to remove the special counsel were linked to the special counsel's oversight of investigations that involved the president's conduct, and most immediately to reports that the president was being investigated for potential obstruction of justice. So that had just happened. That's what he was mad about. All the things that Rudy Giuliani talked about, the bias of Robert Mueller, most of those facts weren't even known to anyone, never mind the president at that time. So that was a pretty bogus answer from Rudy Giuliani, and that's the last of the Giuliani clips. I have one more Kellyanne Conway clip, and then we'll cleanse our palate with a few clips from Democrats, a couple Adam Schiffs and Elijah Cummings. But here is the longer clip of Kellyanne Conway. Oh no, this isn't a longer clip, but this is Kellyanne Conway at the beginning of her interview with Martha Raddatz on ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos. Her response here kind of reminded me of what Sarah Huckabee Sanders said when she was confronted with being revealed as a liar in the Mueller report. She had said that she had heard from countless FBI agents that they were happy that James Comey had been fired. She said that multiple times to the press at the time. And then to Robert Mueller, she said there was absolutely no basis for that statement. And when she was confronted with that this week, she said, well, you know, I'm not a robot. I'm like the Democratic Party, which I don't know. Telling the truth is a robot. I don't know. But I think Kellyanne Conway kind of shows she is sort of a robot in this next clip, because Martha Raddatz asks her about obstruction. And she's so, although Martha Raddatz did say something about collusion very briefly in the beginning of her question, but Kellyanne Conway is so like robotically primed to say no collusion and then say no obstruction that she immediately answers about collusion, and Martha Raddatz has to bring her back to talk about obstruction, and I'll talk about that a little more after we watch this 3-minute 16-second clip together over here.
For coming in on an Easter morning, the president says there is total vindication, complete exoneration, no collusion, no obstruction. I want to start with obstruction. You have seen what the Mueller team concluded, and I want to go to that ending line. While this report does not conclude that the president committed a crime, it also does not exonerate him. So how does the president call this complete exoneration?
The president says that because he's known from the beginning that there was no collusion. There's no criminal conspiracy between the Trump campaign and the Kremlin to try to disrupt and spread disinformation about our elections. And that really was a central premise here. I think ABC was among the first networks to ever use the word collusion in July of 2016, mainly because the Obama administration knew what Russia was trying to do.
Kellyanne, I want to go back to obstruction of justice and what Mueller concluded, and I'll read it again. While this report does not conclude that the president committed a crime, it also does not exonerate.
But that's not really, respectfully, that's not really the job of a prosecutor. The job of a prosecutor is to gather evidence and decide whether to indict or to decline to indict. They declined to indict. The president is not going to jail. He's staying in the White House for 5.5 more years. Why? Because they found no crime, no conspiracy. That was the central premise. That is what everybody, including your next guest, Adam Schiff, said time and again, dozens of times, hundreds of times, in print, on Twitter, on TV. And I think there's a couple other things in the Mueller report that are very important. Not only was obstruction of justice not found, that there was complete compliance. So as Mr. Barr, Attorney General, has also said, that the sheer compliance, the millions of pages of documents, the 500 witnesses, the 2,800 inquiries, the subpoenas, on and on, all of this means that $25 million of taxpayer money, the 2 years that we've been doing this, that they were never interfered or impeded. So there was no obstruction.
We're getting away from this. So will you acknowledge that Mueller explicitly refused to clear the president on obstruction.
There was no reason for him to do that or not to do that for a very simple reason. The central premise here was collusion, and there isn't any. And I am really shocked that
he
the same
looked at
people who
exactly
spent,
what you were talking about. 2 years, he looked at obstruction
and
of
if
justice,
he could have
that's
charged
what
a crime, he would have, because
so
there's,
you
there's
think
enormous
this
pressure.
totally exonerates him?
Yes.
From obstruction of justice?
Yes, I do. And the word exoneration was unnecessary in the Mueller report, and I would say inappropriate. Just like the May 9th, 2017 memo by the newly confirmed 94-6 Deputy Attorney General, Mr. Rosenstein made clear that FBI Director Jim Comey the summer before should never have gone out and said, we're declining to prosecute Hillary Clinton. You just don't do that. You either prosecute or you don't. You either bring an indictment or you don't. And in this case, no one named Kushner, Trump, anybody associated with the campaign
I want to stick to what has happened in this report. The president is now calling the report crazy. Mueller.
And you can see the rest of that interview. That's the last Kellyanne Conway clip. No more Rudy Giuliani clips. All that's left are a couple Adam Schiff clips and Elijah Cummings. The one thing I wanted to point out about that is, I mean, that was a ridiculous analysis, and especially the no exoneration part. I mean, it's true that what James Comey did to Hillary Clinton was wrong, that prosecutors aren't supposed to decline to prosecute and then say all the bad things that someone did, but it's different if the case is of a person who's president, can't be indicted, but should be prosecuted, which is basically the subtext of the obstruction part of the Mueller report, as I talked about earlier. That's why the whole couldn't exonerate thing is in there, because if you go through all of those 10 different episodes of obstruction, most of them show a strong obstructive act, a strong nexus to a proceeding, and strong intent to obstruct. And those are the elements of obstruction, as I've been talking about. So that's why Mueller's a very conservative prosecutor who doesn't want to break the rules. So why would he say no exoneration in the report? Because he's trying to tell everyone there's all this evidence of obstruction of justice, a crime here, and he can't indict him because of Justice Department policy. So it's up to the people and the Congress to move forward. Whether they're going to do that or not, well, that brings us to our next three clips about from the Democrats. This first one is Adam Schiff talking to Martha Raddatz on ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos about what Kellyanne Conway said in the previous clip there, attacking Adam Schiff. I don't think, did I show the part where she said Adam Schiff should resign? Well, you'll see Martha Raddatz ask Adam Schiff about that, about where's all the evidence of collusion you've been promising. Of course, there is a lot of evidence of collusion, and Adam Schiff talks about that and some other stuff that I will talk about with you after we watch that 2-minute plus clip together over here.
Congressman Schiff, Kellyanne Conway has said you should resign as committee chair. I assume you will not. But what about the evidence? You just heard her. You have said there is ample and abundant evidence of collusion, leaving the very strong impression there was illegal activity.
Well, you heard another display of alternate facts from Kellyanne Conway today, where she could not even acknowledge that the Russians tried to help the Trump campaign and did provide substantial help to the campaign. But look, I've been very clear over the last year and a half, that there is ample evidence of collusion in plain sight. And I use that word very carefully because I also distinguish time and time again between collusion, that is acts of corruption that may or may not be criminal, and proof of a criminal conspiracy. And that is a distinction that Bob Mueller made within the first few pages of his report. In fact, every act that I pointed to as evidence of collusion has now been borne out by the report. And I will also say that with respect to most of those acts involving the meeting at Trump Tower, involving the provision of polling data, involving the discussions between the National Security Advisor and the Russian ambassador, all these and so many more, Kellyanne Conway and the President of the United States called this fake news, disputed that these facts were even facts.
But
we now know from Bob Mueller they were facts.
You went farther than saying ample evidence. You once described to me on this program that the Trump administration's actions related to the Russia probe are, quote, of a size and scope probably beyond Watergate. What do you say now?
Well, I think it's clear from the Mueller report that that's exactly right. The obstruction of justice in particular in this case is far worse than anything that Richard Nixon did. The break-in by the Russians of the democratic institutions, a foreign adversary, far more significant than the plumbers breaking into the Democratic headquarters. So yes, I would say in every way this is more significant than Watergate. And the fact that a candidate for president and now a president of the United States would not only not stand up and resist Russian interference in our election, but would welcome it, goes well beyond anything Nixon did. The fact that the President of the United States would take Putin's side over his own intelligence agencies go well beyond anything Richard Nixon did. So, yes, I think it is far more serious than Watergate.
Far more serious than Watergate. And I think that kind of makes sense. The break-in was worse. A lot of it was worse. Of course, Bob Woodward was on Fox News Sunday in a clip I didn't take, saying that he didn't think it was worse than Watergate because in Watergate there was money. You could follow the money, although apparently follow the money was just in the movie. That was one of the things that Bob Woodward pointed out, was they didn't actually, no one ever told him to follow the money, but there was money being paid to keep people quiet, and that's how you could definitely show obstruction in Watergate, and that's why it's not worse than Watergate. But I don't know. If you read the Mueller report, I think worse than Watergate is definitely a defensible position. There's certainly more evidence of obstruction of justice, and that was one of the main things in Watergate was obstruction of justice. Read the Mueller report, read the 10 instances, read the way that Mueller in 9 of the 10, or there are a few that are a little iffy, like I showed in that chart, but most of them there's a strong obstructive act, a strong nexus to a proceeding, and a strong evidence of intent to obstruct, and that's what you need to prove obstruction of justice. So beyond Watergate, I guess we'll end up, we'll see. But the other clip of Adam Schiff I wanted to show is where you'll see Adam Schiff both talk about how there is all this obstruction of justice, that there is enough evidence to show obstruction of justice, how Bob Barr misrepresented what was in the report, and then Adam Schiff will make the same argument that I made a little earlier about how Robert Mueller was saying there is obstruction of justice, it's up to Congress and the people to take care of it. He laid it out, but he couldn't say because of the Justice Department policy that a sitting president can't be indicted, which that's not the law, that's just a Justice Department policy. But anyway, that's the final Adam Schiff clip before, and then I have one more news clip before the bonus Sandy clip at the end that I'll talk about a little more after I show you this Adam Schiff clip talking to Martha Raddatz on ABC's This Morning over here.
On obstruction of justice, based on the information in the report, do you believe the president did obstruct justice?
I do believe that he obstructed justice and did so in many ways. And I think that the Mueller report points out how the elements of obstruction are met in several instances, several courses of the president's conduct. What Bob Mueller said, and this is obviously directly contrary to what Bill Barr represented to the country, is that he felt bound by the Office of Legal Counsel opinion that he could not indict a sitting president. Now, Kellyanne Conway points to that as proof of innocence, but it's not. Bob Mueller made it abundantly clear he felt he could not indict the president. The most that he could do was say that the evidence did not exonerate the president. And I think the reason why he did that is because he could not only not indict the president, but I think he also felt that he could not say that the president should be indicted, because that would be effectively the same thing. That would cast the same stigma over the president that the president would be powerless to remove. So I think that's why Bob Mueller made that non-traditional prosecutorial judgment. He came as close to saying that the evidence of obstruction was evidence of a crime as he could within the Department of Justice regulations. And that's, I think, the point that he was trying to get across, that he preserved the evidence for when the president was out of office, and that he also laid out the evidence so that Congress could understand and undertake its own responsibility.
And Congressman Schiff, let's turn to impeachment.
And like I said before I showed the clip, I agree with Adam Schiff's reading of the Mueller report and Mueller's intent, the subtext reading between the lines that he's saying, I can't say, I can't indict him. I can't say he should be indicted, but I'm going to say everything else I could possibly say up to that point, which, like I said, roadmap for impeachment, roadmap for indictment of Donald Trump after he gets out of office, hopefully on January 20th, 2021. I guess we'll see. And then the final news clip I want to show you. This is the one clip from CBS's Face the Nation. There was no news summary, as I said earlier. Bob Schieffer, the old host, was in for Margaret Brennan, I guess because it's Easter. And I have to say, I think when they scheduled Bob Schieffer for Easter, they were not expecting the Mueller report to come out because he was not really up to speed on it. I'm not sure he even read it. Most of the program was him talking to authors about like strong women, the several authors who wrote books about strong women, and then the LBJ administration. And when he questioned Elijah Cummings and then the Mike Lee, the senator from Utah, not really good, strong confrontational questions, but sometimes softball questions get you some interesting answers. And Elijah Cummings is the chair of the House Oversight Committee, and this softball question to him about, what was most intriguing to you about the Mueller report that maybe Bob Schieffer hasn't even read, and Elijah Cummings gives sort of a roadmap of some of the hearings that might be coming up in the House of Representatives controlled by Democrats to bring out some of this evidence in the final news clip for tonight over here.
Cannot afford that.
What intrigued you most about this report? What do you think needs to be investigated now?
Oh my God! I think we need to look at the finances of this president. I think we need to look at what he knew, with regard to the firing and of various people. We need to know why Mr. Barr gave us a one-sided summary, which has almost no resemblance to what's actually in the report. And we also need to know something else, Bob. We need to know from Mr. Mueller exactly what his intentions were. Did he intend for us as a Congress to look at this and take some type of action, or did he feel as if there was truly no collusion or conspiracy? We need to hear that, and then we also need to hear from people like the counsel for the president and see what Mr. McGahn, who was very clearly disobeying the president in many instances, and actually by disobeying him, he came to his rescue.
Talk to me about the way this report was.
So that's sort of some witnesses we're probably going to be seeing coming up before Congress soon. Bill Barr, the Attorney General, Robert Mueller, the Special Counsel, and Don McGahn, or is it Don McGahn? I'm not sure. The White House counsel who seems to have, he testified for 30 hours with the Special Counsel and seems to have given a lot of evidence about obstruction of justice and maybe even saved the president from being charged with obstruction of justice by refusing to follow his orders and fire Robert Mueller. But anyway, like I said, that's the last of the news clips. I did promise a bonus Dash and Sandy clip, although, here, let me see if I can, this is the Mueller report, but let me see if I can switch this over to So what I'm trying to do is show you my... I'm trying to show you my Super Chat contributors here, but I'm trying to use this live capture window, and I'm changing all the settings here. Maybe that'll work. Yes, thank you to my Super Chat contributors there. Now I'm showing you the live capture window, and I appreciate that. I appreciate the people who, this last week, I especially have gotten a bunch of PayPal contributions at the link down in the video description, and I'm going to be talking about some new Patreon patron rewards and levels, but if you want to find out about that, down in the video description there is a link to become a patron on Patreon. I think there might even be a Sandy webcam coming up that I'll be talking about, but this week I have a special... I don't have a Dash and Sandy clip. I just took a Sandy clip because I caught Sandy barking in her sleep, and it's actually kind of creepy. You know, I guess today is Easter, that some people call that Zombie Jesus Day. This almost looks like, or Game of Thrones Day. Also, the Game of Thrones is back. If you look at like the White Walkers or like the dragon, when they come back to life, their eyes are like totally blank. You'll see here Sandy barking in her sleep with her eyes totally blank, even when she opens them. It's kind of creepy in the bonus Sandy clip for tonight over here. Kind of creepy, wasn't it? When the eyes open but there are no eyes. That is pretty creepy. Anyway, I hope you appreciate the bonus Dash and Sandy clip. I hope you appreciate all the clips I picked out from the Sunday morning news analysis shows, and then my extra special scrolling through the Mueller report. I'm sorry, I didn't quite work out the live screen capture window, so it was showing what I thought it was showing, especially at the beginning there. I apologize for that, but other than that, I hope you appreciate all the work I put into the show. You can show your support giving me a thumbs up, supportive comments, and I already talked about the various ways you can support my videos financially. And next week, I'll probably be doing the show significantly later. I'm like flying in from somewhere Sunday morning, and I'll probably start preparing the show late, and I'll be very tired, and so it'll probably be very late Sunday or early Monday that I do the show next week. But I will be doing the show just as I have for the last 6 years and for the foreseeable future. And until next week, or until I have some reason to upload some other video, like I did that little clip this last week, I guess I will be seeing all of you around the internet.